Well, hello and welcome. Wales Climate Week, and this is a session on transport. I'm really glad that you've all taken a bit of time out of your busy days to join us today. So I'm your chair for the day. My name's Tom Wharf. I'm a chartered civil engineer, and I work at Transport for Wales, leading the design office that is all part of designing walking and wheeling cycling infrastructure as part of a just transition in walking, cycling in Wales. So welcome, really good to have you here. I'm just going to sort of pedal for a bit while we let everybody else join, but I think we're getting all of our attendees joining now. Wales Climate Week, the opportunity for transport to decarbonise and make a contribution to the mitigation of future climate impacts is a really important subject, alongside the opportunities for that the change in our infrastructure required to decarbonise. Contributing positively to climate adaptation is something I'm really interested about, and I'm really interested to hear what all the different panelists we've got along today are going to bring from their respective areas. So I think we'd just like to start there by introducing the panelists. So first, shall we go to yourself, Jarrad, if you'd like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, thanks, Tom. My name is Jarrad Morris. I'm the founder and CEO of FleetEV and Plug Charging. FleetEV is Wales's largest electric vehicle provision company, working with public sector organisations and businesses across Wales to help shift to zero emission transport. We saved the Welsh public sector £1.2 million alone last year. And Plug Charging is the infrastructure arm of the company, where we provide the infrastructure to go along for the just transition. So depot-based charge installations, on-street charging, lamp column chargers, and everything we do is offered bilingually as well. So thanks, Tom. Good to be here.
Thank you. And then Alina.
Hi everyone, I'm Alina Khan and I'm currently a transport planner at Atkins Realis. So I've worked on projects such as the DfT accessibility audits, which audited all train stations across Wales to see just how accessible they are to disabled people. I'm also a commissioner on the National Infrastructure Commission for Wales, which is a non-statutory body or commission who look at the long-term 50 to 100-year needs of people living within the future.
Thanks. Thanks, Lena. And then Jim.
Thanks, Tom. Good morning, everyone. I'm Jim Cardy, Senior Manager at the Welsh Government Energy Service. So our role is to support public sector bodies and community enterprises across Wales to deliver projects that support the transition to a zero carbon economy. So since we've been on since 2018, we've supported £270 million worth of investment in local energy projects. So we cover renewable energy, low carbon heat, building retrofit, and obviously most relevance of today is zero emission transport and charging infrastructure. So yeah, I cover, obviously transport is one of the more challenging sectors to decarbonise, but it's definitely one of the most exciting to work in at the moment. We're seeing real progress across the public sector. And hopefully I'll bring across today some of the community energy projects as well that are kind of helping to underpin the transition, generating power locally and trying to reduce our use of fossil fuels. So yeah, really delighted to be here today and look forward to a good discussion with the panelists.
Fantastic. Thanks, Jim. And then last but definitely not least, Stephen, nice to see you.
Thanks, Tom. I'm Stephen Cunner. I'm the Policy and Communications Manager in Cymru for Walk Wheel Cycle Trust. Some of you may have heard of Sustrans before. We've recently rebranded to Walk Wheel Cycle Trust to better reflect our priorities, which are, as it says on the tin, walk, wheeling and cycling. So I'm hoping to speak about active travel. We're most famous for founding the National Cycle Network, which we still very much focus on, trying to extend it and improve it all the time. But we also are involved in behaviour change projects with schools, with children, and workplaces as well, with adults. And we also have a lot of consultancy and design sort of work with, especially public sector bodies like local authorities, to help them improve their own active travel policies and infrastructure.
Fantastic. So I'm really glad to have introduced all of our panelists, and now we've got just a moment of reflection on the state of where we are today, because it's worth noting that around 70% of our 2050 infrastructure is already with us today, and the decisions we're making right now have a long reach, and I've always been really interested in that long-term impact of infrastructure, and that's why both me and Alina have taken positions on the National Infrastructure Commission for Wales, and me also in the past, Alina, and that long view of what infrastructure can do is something that's always fascinated me. And I often think of this little anecdote where my journey to school as a child was on a road that was built by Julius Caesar, and he very much had in mind that I would say his name 2,000 years later. Now, in 2,000 years, the decisions that we make will still be making an impact on our planet. And I think that real long view of what sustainability is a really important change in how we understand our impact as decision makers in the 21st century. But yeah, back to where we are right now in terms of the challenges of decarbonising our transport infrastructure. I'd like to just offer it up to the panel, if anyone wants to come in on this point. Where are you finding those particular challenges in your decarbonisation agendas right now, panelists?
I can jump in if you want on the Jarrad from FleetEV. So we've been involved, particularly in the public sector, over the last 3 years on decarbonising local authorities. We deal with 20 to 22 local authorities in Wales. I think where we've seen the challenges, particularly over the last 12 months, is on larger vehicles, and that's across a few different reasons. So larger vehicles, often the workhorses which are being used in the public sector, which they've got to carry bigger payloads. So you're talking about refuse vehicles, nappy wagons, all the big workhorses. They're the ones which we've seen particular challenges in over the last 12 months. Whereas if you look at things like smaller vans and cars, they seem to be decarbonising at a greater rate. And I think that's down to a lot of the work that Jim and his team are doing the Welsh Government Energy Service with analysis of fleet data and looking at vehicles which are ready to be switched. But I think we've seen real progress in the last 12 months alone. Whereas, we were talking maybe 12 months ago where you couldn't get things like electric tippers and electric luton vans, which were any good for the job. We're now putting 10s and 20s of those into local authorities on a regular basis, and it's a lot more readily accepted. So I think it's shifted a lot more in the last 12 months, but the bigger vehicles still a bit of a challenge.
Yeah, so that logistics is a very often overlooked part of our transport system. So we have to move people in comfort, in the right temperature, and with in a way that meets our human needs. But logistics is very much that sort of almost invisible partner in our transport system that keeps everything else working and enables all of our other activities across society. Really interesting challenge around larger vehicles as well. And I know that there is a place for light mobility in that space as well, especially in urban areas. And maybe just exploring that with the panel. Did anyone want to speak about sort of urban logistics a little bit further?
I can come in, Tom, quickly, if that's okay, on urban logistics. I mean, when you look at transport and freight, a lot of the most well-designed places for people to live, they actually have very small streets and they restrict quite heavily freight. And I think that has a part to play, because we always have to balance transporting goods and, having nice places for people to live. So there's a lot of companies now looking at last mile delivery. We've seen it in big cities, especially like London, where cycle couriering, for example, has become the norm now, which just didn't exist, frankly, 10, 20 years ago. And I recently had a conversation with a company in Hereford, which is split by a big A road. Lots of freight and other movements through the city. And they actually find it a lot quicker and easier to cut across the city quickly with electric cargo bikes. So there are other ways to do it, to move around and to organise our cities, both which is more efficient and cheaper sometimes for small businesses to get things across quickly, but also has less impact on the people that live in there. Yeah,
I mean, yeah, impact is an interesting word in this context. As a civil engineer, aware of the sort of fourth power law relationship between axle weight and road wear is a emerging challenge. If vehicle weights do increase, this has an impact on our road maintenance, and by reducing the weight of our heaviest vehicles in our towns and cities, breaking things up potentially into smaller loads, there's real opportunities to reduce those. Often talks about potholes, fixing the potholes. Well, that would potentially reduce the overall amount of potholes. An interesting, perhaps a positive benefit of maybe using smaller vehicles in urban logistics, and also thinking about how we design our streets. That they often talked about bin lorry problem that defines how big our streets are and how big the radii of various junctions are. The other point that came up there was around inclusivity and accessibility, and I was really interested to hear about your accessibility audit, Selina. Maybe I just wanted to spend a moment thinking about that social justice in the transition towards a zero carbon economy. What mistakes have you been made in this space, and how are people maybe seeing this differently moving forward?
I think instead of phrasing it as mistakes, I'd phrase it as we're developing and we're growing in this space. To see a big body like the DfT, Department for Transportation, invest in ensuring that train stations are accessible to disabled and also people from other minority ethnic backgrounds by introducing different signages in different languages. I think it shows that we are taking a step in the right direction in terms of ensuring that we are facilitating net zero through modal shift to modes such as rail. So I think it's shown a really positive step to me as someone who's quite a bit younger, earlier in the career, to see such a big institution invest so heavily in this. So it's for me, it's a really positive sign that we are taking steps towards trying to achieve net zero in Wales.
Okay, so yeah, in terms of that, I like your framing there. So there's opportunities in this space as well, created by us understanding it through a more inclusive lens. And I just wanted to see whether anyone else wanted to come in on those opportunities around inclusion and elsewhere in that transition. So more broader opportunities.
Happy to share some thoughts. I think, we definitely recognise, I think transport decarbonisation needs to work for everyone, and not just in urban centres. So there's the balance between what works. A perfect example, light mobility is brilliant in the city, but rural areas face unique barriers, more limited public transport, kind of longer travel distances, obviously access to charging infrastructure. And we're seeing massive steps forward to address gaps in charging provision, but there's still kind of work to do. And we've got to ensure that kind of vulnerable communities aren't left behind by any solutions that we all collectively discuss and develop. And I think focus on the just transition, I think, certainly on the energy service, or integrating and kind of promoting and support Welsh Government supporting community energy is a massive way to address that. Bringing people along, allowing communities to develop solutions that are suitable for themselves. It gets people locally interested in the technology. So I've got some case studies I can kind of share later, but we've seen projects where communities have developed kind of small EV charging hubs linked to solar and storage increasingly, allowing kind of charging provision where there may not be economic from the private sector. Shared infrastructure, so definitely seeing kind of the public sector taking the lead on charging hubs, hopefully making it more of their own infrastructure available to people. We're seeing kind of quite big deployment of EV charging infrastructure, and often those depot locations are outside of urban centres and dotted fairly fairly evenly across the country. All LAs are doing this now. So bringing the public sector along and them supporting it's really important as well. It's really key that there's good financial support for projects, particularly where there might not be income. So, with a renewable energy generation, there's income and there's options for the communities to sell that power, kind of less so with EV charging. So it's important that there's finance to support that, and I think Welsh Government have definitely backed that area. I think definitely collaboration, government, local authorities, community enterprises all working together really is the key to a just transition going forward.
So again, back to those ways of working, back to the collaborating for our goals is a really, really cool part of that. I suppose the opportunity for the just transition to include more people. Certainly, rural areas was something you spoke about there, and that really is an area in which EVs can shine. Is that borne out in where investment in EV infrastructure is happening? Is it happening in those rural areas? And it is because we know in town centres there's issues with parking, certainly in our Victorian town cores. The street topologies don't lend themselves so well for on-street charging. But in rural areas, are we finding that investment's happening? Maybe one for Jarrad.
Yeah, I think you're right. The M4 corridor has got really strong investment, but as soon as you start going to Mid and North Wales, we see in particular starting to lack a little bit there. I think the big problems there is actually having the grid in the right areas. You might have really displaced communities. We've got maybe 1 or 2 miles between villages, and is there enough demand there for the private sector to go and spend 200,000, 300,000 potentially on a grid connection? Probably not, and I think that's probably where the public sector and maybe some funding and subsidies come into that, because everyone's biting the hands off local authorities to get into city centres and put on charging into the places which are densely populated. As soon as you start going out into the sticks and places, I'm from Leith originally, a lot of the surrounding areas around there, the charging infrastructure there is very limited. Whereas if you come to Cardiff, where I live now, the charge that you're never more than 2 miles away from a charger. So I think there's going to have to be some more investment from the public sector to make it commercially justifiable, because no charge point operator, and we operate a charge point operator as well. You need to put them in places where the utilisation is going to repay the investment. And ultimately, everyone's got a cost of funds, but we are seeing a lot more. On our drives to North Wales, visit local authorities, there's a lot more chargers popping up. What we do see is the speed of those chargers probably isn't as fast as the ones you see in some more the densely populated areas. Which is probably is contradictory to what we need. If you go into those areas, you don't want to be waiting in a random lay-by for 3-4 hours whilst your car charges. You want to be on a 50 or 120 kilowatt DC charge on a quick turnaround. So it's definitely getting better. I think where we've seen a lot of that growth is in hotels and hospitality. So we have a lot of clients in Cardigan, for example, Mid Wales, North Wales, who hotel clients who sell their services on the basis that when you go there, you can plug in at night and charge on a 7 or 22 kilowatt charger. So I think there's almost a bit of a halfway house there on people coming to the table with alternatives, which aren't super fast chargers en route, but are more destination based solutions. But there's still some way to go in my opinion. Yeah.
Okay. So moving from sort of private vehicles onto sort of public transport. So introducing where Transport for Wales sees our vision and mission right now. So one timetable, one ticket, one team is very much where we are looking to go with integrating bus and rail across Wales, with walking and cycling to provide end-to-end journeys. So I just wanted to offer that integration piece to you, Stephen, and see where you saw the opportunities in the near future in that space.
Yeah, thanks, Tom. I'll just quickly refer back to a couple of other contributions if I can, Tom. So
Yeah, cool.
you mentioned Julius Caesar right at the beginning, Tom, which I had a little joke, a laugh at. 2,000 years old, but obviously he wasn't using electric vehicles then, was he, or any sort of powered vehicle in that way? Maybe horse-drawn vehicles, I don't know. But so our roads do change all the time, right? And our transport systems change, and a lot of the infrastructure is repurposed from generation to generation as well. You know, we do it a lot with old train lines, which sadly in many ways were closed by beaching, and we use them now for walking and cycling. But I think a lot of that needs to happen more to our roads as well, especially on those areas that you mentioned, Tom, around stations and you know, in the middle of cities, because you know, I do support, you know, there's many benefits of the conversion to EVs, but some of the disbenefits of private vehicles will remain even with EVs. So the congestion, you know, the blockages to the economy, I already mentioned this before, the poor impact on, you know, urban living in terms of storage of vehicles and you know, the road safety dangers and so on and so forth. So, you know, I think as well, especially on this integration piece, Tom, we need to rethink how we use our existing infrastructure and look at modal shift as well to make it easier and safer, you know, for people to get to their bus stop, even make it lighter so it's more appealing. Make sure even simple things, you know, with lots of pavements, which don't even have drop curbs that disabled people can't get up even to get out their house to the local shop or the bus station or whatever. So there's lots of really simple things we can do just to change how our existing infrastructure is more accessible to everyone and joined up.
Yeah. Do you want to come in on that, Alina, please?
Yes, sorry. I just wanted to say with that, it's difficult to speak about the one ticket system, which is really exciting, without discussing digital poverty. So there's a lot of communities within Wales who either don't have great access to internet or don't know how to use it. So in order for this to work in a just way and thinking about that future, with that future lens about the way that AI and digital is going, we need to ensure that these communities are part of the conversation and are included in how this is going to move forward to ensure that everyone can use these systems in the future.
Yeah, so digital exclusion, especially yeah, where it interfaces with poverty, I think that's really good to highlight. The other type of exclusion in that one timetable and one network space is one that I've been discussing with a lot of colleagues recently, especially at this time of year, where my wife will take a different route home from me in the summer, but be happy to walk across the park. Sorry, happy to walk across the park with me in the summer, but take a different route home in the winter as the nights close in. And that so there is a big, very normalised gender difference in our access to networks and access to timetables based on our gender. Did you want to come in on? Is that something you might be able to expand upon, Alina? Bring you in on that.
Yes, and I can do it from a kind of anecdotal perspective as well, where I am personally quite wary and slightly afraid, and I get a bit of anxiety when I do travel on public transportation or use active travel routes when it gets dark. So this particularly impacts me during winter. And I actually did a study on this for my dissertation because I had so much interest in it, and it impacted me to such a kind of degree. And the outputs of my dissertation showed that women do feel unsafe using public transportation and active travel routes to a higher degree than men. So this is something that I don't know, Stephen, if you can add to, or Jim or Tom, in terms of how you've worked to include this kind of perspective in future planning for active travel and public transportation.
Did you want to come back on that briefly, Stephen?
Yeah, thanks, Alina. I mean, it's something that, you know, I think is a constant battle, really, isn't it? To make sure that, you know, that all voices are heard in design, and it has to be done at an early stage. I manage policy for Walk Wheel Cycle Trust, and I've just been looking at our manifesto asks for the next Senate election. One of the things we've put is to have disabled people's voices heard right at the beginning of any, you know, active travel or transport investment, because ultimately those lived experiences, you know, that they can be really powerful and inform design so it is accessible. So yeah, there's no quick fire answer really, because, you know, I think all all investment and all transport infrastructure, serves the whole population, right? So there's lots of needs and different, but if we don't actually listen to the most vulnerable people, I don't think we'll get it right to begin with.
Yeah, and I think that there's something inherently foundational about these sorts. The walking, wheeling, and cycling. God, it's a mouthful of a few words, and that's why we do tend to use these terms like active travel, or I'm hearing more and more soft mobility in terms of describing this kind of transport. The resilience it offers is one that I often reflect upon when we're confronted with big economic shocks like the COVID pandemic, or like the 70s oil crisis. We can always resort to these more available, near universally available modes. So they do protect us, I think, against those shocks that are not likely going to become more and more frequent with climate change impacting us more and more. Thinking about how the nearer future, the more distant future looks like in terms of that transition, what other parts of the system do we need to fix to enable more heavy? We spoke earlier about heavy transport decarbonisation, and I am interested. I've got background in maritime engineering as well, so I am interested in that broader piece of the link with national and international logistics and heavy transport, and they do contribute very significant amounts to our greenhouse carbon footprint. So I just wondered whether Jim, you had any thoughts on the potential for Wales to contribute to those. How do we decarbonise some of that heavier stuff around transport?
Yeah, certainly, we absolutely need to decarbonise heavy freight and heavy transport. We're seeing some really interesting developments across Europe at the moment with like a kind of megawatt charging networks across the main routes. So there seems to be increasing focus on battery electric heavy trucks. I think the idea has been that it's not possible to do that with battery electric vehicles, and that potentially hydrogen in the future might address that. But I think we're seeing from the manufacturers, from governments across Europe, that it's likely to be battery electric, but focused on the kind of the main core arterial motorways throughout Europe and then into the UK. So I'm starting to see attention being put towards those kind of megawatt charging network routes, and yeah, we'd like to see more in Wales, and I think that's probably the way. There'll be routes through the country with these heavy charging stations, and then kind of last mile delivery will kind of move on to the more traditional charging network. So certainly the technology affordability of batteries is all contributing to that, and it's just moving really fast. I think every 6 months or so there's kind of new developments, new models of vehicles coming out. And certainly our focus on the energy service is the heavier end of public sector fleets. There's a lot of vehicles in depots all up and down the country that need decarbonising, waste vehicles, things like gully cleaners, road sweepers. All of these things are part of the local authorities' work day to day. That it's challenging for local authorities to understand what technology is available. Affordability is absolutely key. As we know, it's tough times for local authorities at the moment. So finding extra capital for battery electric versions, something that we've helped with for many years. But there's also the back end, how to deploy it effectively, how to understand daily use and routes, and whether certain size batteries can do the job. So yeah, there's a whole space that is really exciting, as things are definitely moving forward. But yeah, still a long way to go for heavy freight.
Yeah, no, fascinating. And I do like this idea of us becoming more fluent with these networks, these threads of chargers that will allow us and facilitate that transport across the country. No, really interesting. So thinking about the sort of broader, more cross-cutting themes, one that I'm particularly interested in is how transport can unlock not the potential within Wales. And I'm very good at coming up with, and I imagine like many of the panelists, great ways for us to spend Welsh money on infrastructure projects, and because I can see those broader benefits. But I suppose I'm interested in the panel's view on how that infrastructure investment can then unlock further benefits for Wales. Now, I'm clearly an advocate for the power of streets and well-designed streets to create places that allow us to thrive as people. Reducing the costs on society and maximising the benefits from local transport. And that can include like independent childhood mobility, mobilities of care, and allowing for sort of more normal trip training journeys that are required for those mobilities of care that hold our society together. I wanted to put it to the panel to see whether anyone wants to talk about those broader opportunities to unlock the potential in Wales to increase productivity, to help our communities grow the pie such that there is more pie to share around for investment in education, health, and transport investment. So I don't know who to put that to, but I'm looking for a hand up from the panel there.
I guess I can come in here, and I think one broader opportunity that comes with investment in infrastructure or heavy infrastructure, as you said, is job opportunities for local communities. So I read somewhere that there's opportunity for job creations of around 23k. So that means that 23,000 more people in Wales could have jobs within these industries. So it's a growing industry. There's lots of opportunities, and I think that's a broader opportunity that people tend to forget as well. That kind of wider economic benefit to the people.
Yeah. More trains, more train drivers, more buses, more bus drivers, and this kind of opportunity in that space. Yeah, no, absolutely. And these are nice. These are good jobs. That can't necessarily be replaced. Certainly, we know we need for the reasons of just transition, a driver or a guard within the train or bus to keep people safe, as we've been reminded in the last couple of days with national news, just how important that is for that system's resilience. So that's a really interesting point. Building on that, other opportunities in the way that we do this just transition, creating more opportunity in Wales. Does anyone else want to come in on that? More wealth?
I think I can jump in on that. So I think we've seen some real big benefits with collaboration. So collaboration is key to this transition. And one of the things that we've been involved in, which was the Welsh Government Collaborative Procurement Framework, where local authorities and public sector in Wales group together their buying power to purchase vehicles, which we delivered for them and will continue to deliver for them. So last year alone, that saved £1.2 million compared to traditional procurement routes. So, that doesn't just need to be public sector. That could be businesses grouping together. It can be local communities grouping together to buy vehicles. Rather than buying the ones and twos of vehicles, you're buying them hundreds at a time. And rather than having those small conversations, having the larger conversations and getting those discounts. So I think we've seen particular success with that. We've obviously put £1.2 million back straight into the things you mentioned there. So the public purse. And I think there's some real opportunities for that across the fleet and the infrastructure side of things as well. And that collaborative view is key.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I was going to jump in on just on the we've not kind of touched on it, but too much today. But the energy generation side of the equation, we can't have an upscale in heat pumps, electric vehicles, especially heavy vehicles, without a really solid, resilient, low carbon energy backbone. You've got to supply that. We're electrifying society, or we hope to electrify society, and underpinning that is ideally renewable energy. Part of the energy services work is to ensure that communities can develop their own renewable energy benefit from selling electricity. There's the investment side where communities can develop and deploy wind, solar, storage projects, and now increasingly EV. But yeah, the job that improves engagement, I think, and if communities see the benefits of some of this stuff staying inside their local community, the money recycles quicker. Rather than kind of going off outside of the country, that's a massive benefit. It's hard to capture sometimes, but we definitely see it in our work and our data. Absolutely, the jobs aspect, we're certainly seeing with the amount of investment Welsh Government have put in at the moment. It was said 270 million of projects since 2018. A lot of that work is delivered by local installers. Big deployments into solar at the moment and storage, and we've seen firms that have learned on a project, they've scaled up, they've been procured, they've scaled up to deliver a solar project. That's those skills they learn on the job, and then they're now going out and winning work across the UK. So there's been some amazing stories of firms just building their capacity. As long as you need consistent investment and certainty for firms to invest as well. So seeing continuity of investment, not things flashing up and down, is vital to business confidence. So you tie all that together, I think, just in continuing to invest in renewables in Wales, continue to invest in community energy in Wales. I think a lot of the stuff the firms and the economy will come along with that and respond to the investment and challenge. So yeah, really exciting stuff going across the board, really.
Yeah, and the work of electrical engineers to support that transition is just fascinating. But it does come back to also to the planning system, and I suppose this is again like a really cross-cutting theme that will impact all of us. TAN 18 is a dated document now. What would we need to see that support for your sectors? Recognizing not everyone here has a particular sector, but what do you see, panelists, as the changes you want to see in TAN 18 to support that big scale change? We're going to need increased changes to our transmission and distribution system. It's going to need different grid balancing. It's going to need where do we set out our towns and invest in them and how do we prioritise new development through the planning system? So, Stephen, did you want to come in on that?
Yeah, can I just quickly make 1 or 2 points on the economy as well, Tom?
Yeah, please.
Very quickly just from the out to travel perspective on this one.
Yeah.
But we know that it hasn't been mentioned. Running a car and electric vehicles at the moment are even more expensive than a combustion engine car. It's very expensive, and about half of people in Wales spend over 10% of their income just on running a vehicle. So it's inaccessible to a lot of people. And if we could, in any way, and one of those ways is shifting to different forms of travel, like out to travel. If we could save money and disposable income as individuals, that would grow the economy because we'd have more to spend elsewhere in the economy. We also know that it's actually good for productivity to have physical exercise. So kids who walk to school tend to be better at school. People who jog and run tend to be more productive. And I'm not saying jogging and running to school is for everyone, but walking or cycling at your lunch break or to school to work could work. And we also know that those towns and villages which attract people walking, they tend to spend more in their local shops. So there's lots of things there which Wales is a country of small villages and small towns we could do to improve our communities and improve ourselves, have more money and better productivity if we just walk and cycle a little bit more. But on planning, Tom, this is endless, really, isn't it? I would say the easy win is new builds, developments. When we do our local development plans or regional development plans, we need to be putting new developments next to existing transport hubs, rail stations, bus stations. We need to be making sure that infrastructure which the developers promise is delivered as far as possible up front, so that as soon as people move to new developments, they have access to decent walking infrastructure, cycle infrastructure, local bus routes, and that we just don't see that happening enough at the moment in Wales, even though a lot of good stuff has been done.
Yeah, recognizing that what we've got right now isn't necessarily the way it has to be, is I think one of the biggest mind flips of all. And I was really struck by staying on that school transport piece, and you made me reminding me of. I'm surprised to find out that in Japan is very like the normal age, the absolute accepted standard age for kids to walk to school unaccompanied is 6 years old. Anyone who walks their kids to school with their kids over 6 is considered a little bit mollycoddly. Yeah. And as such, driver behaviour expects children to be unaccompanied at that very young age, and therefore expects children to do normal 6-year-old stuff as well on the streets. So it demands a very different way of looking at the planning system, and those kids are all getting that benefit. Those benefits are observed in lots of different studies on their well-being from the start of the day. So that's just another sort of benefit. Okay, I realise we're probably getting towards questions time. So I wanted to just kind of queue up the audience to get your questions ready, and I will start throwing it open to questions in a bit. So you'll need to put your questions in the chat. I see a few of them. I see a few statements in the chat. But if you want to think about how it's phrasing up some questions and getting them ready, I'm going to ask one last question to the panel, so I'm interested about the way we bring other people into our decision making, those sort of participatory approaches, because being an engineer, I've often had to have my my convictions challenged by the real world that other people inhabit. So recognizing that my truth isn't the same for everybody is a really important part of the journey we go on as designers and engineers. Not everybody's body looks like me. Not everybody has the same tolerances as me. How have you guys as professionals brought in those participatory approaches to listen to communities, and then how has that impacted your work? Because I think that's really key to unlocking the future we need is bringing other people along on the journey with us. So open to the panel. Did anyone want to come in on that?
I can jump in on that. So I think, from our point of view, particularly with plug charging, so a real world example, we have some lamp column chargers. So EV chargers plug inside a lamppost going into Cardiff very shortly. One of the things, one of the risks that we found when looking to put those in was the risk of vandalism, but also the risk of people parking diesel and petrol vehicles in front of those chargers. So it's something which is called icing, which is a common term in the industry. And one of the solutions that we've come across, which kind of brings the community along with that, is we've actually dedicated each charger for each charging session will then give a percentage of that revenue to a cause, but hyper-focus that area. So if you live in a particular area of Cardiff, for example, every charging session from that particular charger will give a percentage of that revenue to a local football team or local community cause. And what we try to do with that is try and create a community asset. So there's a sense of ownership and the sense of belonging with that if someone does see someone damaging it or someone sees someone blocking it, that they say, well, actually, no, guys, don't block that. And in the same way that if someone's parked on the curb and they were blocking it, you'd go knock someone's door and tell them off for it. So that's something in a practical sense we've tried. Obviously, there's no legal obligation for people to follow that, but we're hoping people do the right thing and feel like they can be brought along with the journey by creating some hyper-focused local social value with it as well.
Creating new norms is a real challenge and new behaviours. But did anyone else want to come in on this point?
Yeah, I think I've got a few thoughts. Definitely agree with you, Tom, on a certain way of thinking about things. I'm definitely more focused on the technical aspects of technology and get excited about vehicles and charging infrastructure. And I certainly think more on our community energy side. Developing renewables is vital for public trust and engagement early in the process. It's got to be kind of participatory. You've got to be clear with communities on what's being developed, engage with them early in the planning process, help them shape projects. I think we benefit instantly where a project is developed by local community enterprise. That immediately puts people on a positive footing, but still, it was particularly for larger projects, and we're needing to look at larger projects as purely for economic reasons. That you have to keep people on board. You have to be clear on how the benefits are going to be distributed. And certainly the whole point of community enterprise is generally to keep the profits from a project and reinvest them in a community. So loads of our projects, you can have a look at our case studies online, but people like EGNI, I think, are one of our biggest solar co-ops, worked with local authorities on local authority sites, do loads of work on climate engagement, education in schools, that type of thing. And that's all of that money is being funded from their renewable deployment. So yeah, absolutely. I think that's the main way that we engage with people, using workshops, etc. So yeah, I think that's some thoughts on the renewable side.
Yeah, so people can really see those benefits and know that they're going to be captured locally. And that they can see the future that's available to them by participating, I suppose. And I know that's a particular challenge in the street design and street space, because it's such an intimate type of infrastructure. Your electrical infrastructure is kind of hidden out of the way, but as soon as a bunch of guys in high-vis jackets turn up with breakers outside your house, it's one of the most intrusive bits of infrastructure to have changed. People really need to be on board with what's being offered at that stage. Right, I can see we're getting some questions in. I'm gonna pick some questions. I suppose that's a sec. There is one question here from Siak Kulsma, and it's just a thought on green hydrogen. And I recognise that I was advised by a very wise mechanical engineer that there's no point debating electricity or carbon powered vehicles. We're clearly going to need both. We're in an emergency. The planet is on fire. We definitely need to be progressing with both. They have different operating benefits. So I just wanted to see whether anyone on the panel has any knowledge of hydrogen and where that fits in the decarbonisation of transport.
Yes,
I was
going to say it's come across our desk a few times, particularly from fleet managers that have seen the glossy magazines talking about hydrogen vans and how they're the future. I think one of the things that we often see for smaller vehicles and anything up to 7.5 ton, the battery electric vehicles are there or thereabouts in terms of suitable for requirements. There might be some slight shifts which need to happen in terms of how they're used, or might be a bit more pre-planning. But then when you go above the 7.5 ton, as I've already touched on, some of the challenges are there. I agree that in some of the larger vehicles, there is definitely a market for hydrogen and definitely a use case. But one of the challenges, and I appreciate the comment from the question there on the green hydrogen in Port Talbot, is just finding that green hydrogen and having a readily available source of it. Depots that have electric vehicles office have solar on the roof, of battery energy storage systems. They can produce their own energy without having massive cylinders and 50 meter blast radiuses around them. From a health and safety point of view, it's more practical to have EV. You can fuel them in more places. The route planning is easier, albeit with hydrogen, you can go longer distances. So, I think for marine aviation and large truck applications, if they're going across continents, I think hydrogen might be a use case in some cases. But it's widely publicised about the inefficiencies of hydrogen production, and having a good source of hydrogen is the main problem. If you're talking about the US, that's a different story. But the UK, other than some of the green hydrogen which is being generated, most of it's imported. So you've then got a well-to-wheel. The efficiency of that is not as good as it should be compared to EV. Yeah,
and the different sources of hydrogen for being assigned different colours. Something I'm aware of. Your green, your blue, your brown hydrogens. And yeah, that links to a point Jim made earlier about supporting the clean generation, not just at the vehicles themselves, but that cleaner generation. Okay, I suppose also we're thinking about those the success of the South Wales Metro, the Core Valley Line's upgrade in innovating around intermittent overhead electrification that really hadn't been done anywhere else, but allowed the by combining battery, diesel, and electric overhead line powered. We've got that tri-mode running that just gives us more versatility and more resilience as a system. Okay, so in communities, the school bike bus movement is growing, supported by Walk, Wheel and Cycle Trust. Those that changing behaviours with children is sort of insinuated there, and I'm just interested in how do we how does maybe Sustrans, Stephen, support that behaviour change with young people? Because if we can get them young, get them hooked, make habits that last a lifetime, this could be good for them all. Did you want to speak a little bit on that?
Yeah, thanks, Tom. And just say thanks to Richard for the question as well. I remember speaking to Richard about this particular bike bus about 3 or 4 years ago, and we was very much involved in setting that one up. But yeah, I think that's just one of the things that we do, the bike bus, and it's really about making it safe and controlled in some ways, because not all infrastructure, like you said about Japan, Tom, is up to that standard yet in Wales by far. So it's about having adults who can provide the safe infrastructure or the safe background and risk assess it for the kids, also making it fun, so it just becomes natural and something that they want to do. We try to put music on the bike buses and things like that, and do themes to them, so that it becomes an event in itself, and the kids love it. And we've had some, including the one that Richard's referred to there, where we've joined up with other schools now and had hundreds of people cycling through urban streets to school. So it is a brilliant movement. But it's only part of a mix. I mean, when you talk about behaviour change of kids, that's just cycling. We also do walking buses, something called school streets, which I think are really amazing. They did loads of them in Paris, and Wales has got quite a few of them now. Cardiff, I think, is probably leading the way, where the street which the school's based on is closed off pick up and drop off time to non-residents. So it just makes the street safer, less pollution by the school gate. But also, again, encourages people to walk and cycle, because they can't do drop off and go at the school gate. What else? I mean, we do get some funding from the Welsh Government for our Active Journeys programme, where we have officers that go directly into schools, and really it's bespoke. It can be all sorts of stuff. So helping the kids have a part in designing and identifying what's stopping them walking. So looking at the infrastructure around school and applying for grants. Making sure there's safe storage, so that their bikes and scooters can be dry and safe while they're in class. There's all sorts of things, Tom, and I think some of this is being done well in Wales with our support as a charity, but it's probably not widespread enough. Only 25% of schools in Wales have a strategy, a strategic plan, an active travel plan to look to try and help more of their pupils get safely to school by walking or cycling.
Yeah, the simple things like having an actual coat hook available for kids to hang up their wet clothes when they walk to school. That's not universally available. Okay, looking through the questions, I am interested by there's a technical question here on EV uptake and improvements in air quality. And also it links to another question around EV removing exhaust emissions, nitrogen dioxide and other exhaust emissions, particulates. But there are other particulates still from brakes, roads and tyres. Is there any evidence emerging in that sort of EV and air quality space? Maybe one for you, Jarrad?
Yeah, and I think that the spot on there. The exhaust emissions definitely do decrease, which is a natural switch of going EV. But with the heavier vehicles, the brake particulates, tire particulates, for example, do increase. So I think there was a study by Imperial College where they did notice an improvement in air quality. They did a test on London, but they did pick up on a increase in the brake particulates in the air. So yeah, it's just trying to find that balance. Less vehicles. Going back to some of the points made earlier, is the better option, and having less congestion. I know I'm probably shooting myself in the foot there because it's our main business is selling and charging vehicles. But there is that case to be made for the larger vehicles being used in a smarter way. And a lot of that comes down to planning correctly and not having vehicles for the sake of it as well. I think is a key thing for us. That tire part and the brake aspect of it is unavoidable at the moment. There is a lot of research going into it, and one of the other questions coming around is the end of life batteries as well. Doesn't contribute to the air quality, but it does contribute to the overall sustainability of the vehicle. When I first got into this space in 2014, I think the recycling of batteries was basically unheard of. Now you can recycle up to 98% of an EV battery. It's actually more cost effective and commercially beneficial to recycle an EV battery. So I think tires and brakes will follow that same path where they start to make better inroads in reducing that aspect of it. But yeah, unfortunately, it's unavoidable at the moment.
So there's a couple more questions, sort of car related, at the bottom of the chat from Dan and from Sarah, relating to the culture where car ownership is deeply tied to status, convenience, and economic growth, and how living in rural Wales, and I grew up. I challenge the audience to live as rurally as I did when I grew up in the middle of absolute nowhere. It is a freedom to have a car. There is no putting them back in the box. They cars exist and will probably exist in some form indefinitely, but they don't work so well in our cities, and I think we are. It was really good to hear that reflection, Jarrad. I mean, I'd say there's similar limitations on bikes, on cycling. Although I'm sure it's technically possible to find a cargo bike with powered trailer that will get your cow to market. I wouldn't suggest that farmers look at this as a reasonable form of rural transport. Just so as the car is not necessarily the right tool for getting your kid to school a mile away in our busy urban centres. Right tool for the right job. In terms of that rural dependency on vehicles, no, I think we do understand we're going to need vehicles. They offer us a way of carrying us and our luggage in rural areas, certainly. So yeah, really interested to hear those questions. I hope I've done them some justice. I think we should be sort of trying to bring things to a close now. I'm just gonna check through the last questions. The question on e-bike chargers, I do recognise that's. I mean, something I've an opinion on that's quite. The average house has 30 standard e-bike charging points. Your regular 240-volt plug. Yes, you do have to carry your own charger around, and that changes the convenience equation for e-bikes, or I've heard them called amplified mobility recently, which is a nice term. The electric versus acoustic debate continues. I think hopefully I've answered that question. I just wanted to sort of wrap up. If you wanted to give the audience one takeaway point that was related to what the change you'd like to see in 10 years' time. We all massively overestimate what we can achieve in a year, but I'd like to challenge the speakers today that we also massively underestimate how much change we can generate in a decade. So in a decade's time, what is the change? If you could wave a magic wand and get us there now, what would you like to see? And I'm gonna start with pick on Jim, because you look like you had an idea, and I'm going to work through. Go, Jim.
I can't talk about rural, but I live in the centre of Cardiff, and I have done my entire life. So air quality is, I'm a cyclist. I cycle every single day. I do also own an EV, and I've always been very concerned about air pollution. I live near a main road. So cycling out, getting a lungful of diesel is very deeply unpleasant. Even when I walk my dog, he'll sneeze when a car has gone past. He's got a really sensitive nose, so I can physically feel, the effects of air pollution. So my aim is just absolute electromobility in cities. I would push everything towards it, light cars, light vans, medium vans, active travel, electric bikes, just as an urban dweller. That's what I want to see. I think it would make a massive improvement to people's lives. I don't think people really, air pollution is often invisible. I don't think people really think about it day to day, but we know the health effects of diesel particulates. Recognise the person's comment about brake dust, etc. But I think the harm reduction potential is massive. So that's my vision for the future for 10 years, is to continue developing it, making it inclusive, and also absolutely public transport, rail infrastructure. Big fan of trains. Want the metro to continue to develop and expand. So yeah, that's my vision and hope for the next 10 years. I think we've seen I'm not an expert on air pollution, but I've seen apparently some really positive numbers coming out of London about the clean air zones there, just huge drops. And people are anecdotally saying that they notice a difference when they've come back after many years in the quality of the air in the city. So yeah, I think that's my hope and aim for the next 10 years.
Yeah, I think that the evidence coming around the world, Paris is another example of where change has really happened, and they seize the opportunity of COVID to reimagine their streets and the way people get around that city for the better. Jarrad, 10 years time, what would you like to see? The big change?
Yeah, I think similar to German cyclists as well, and I think the less diesel vehicles on the road, the better. I think for us to get to that ultimate aim of getting those off the road is the collaboration piece for us. We need to remember this is a revolution, not an evolution, is what we say, and you need to be making sure that the chargers are in the correct places, and hopefully within 10 years time we're in a position where everyone has fair, accessible access to not just charging but EVs as well. But I would caveat with, there's a lot of misinformation around at the moment. And I think a lot of businesses are put off making that switch to EV and making that switch based on the fact they don't think it's right for them. And I think there's some work to be done on that from us in the industry, on making sure people see it as a viable switch that's practical for them in their day-to-day lives.
No, I think that's, making it really practical and killing diesel at the same time. I think that is a really lovely pincer movement. Alina, 10 years time.
As a Commission on National Infrastructure Commission for Wales, I think I'm going to extend that timeline a bit. 10 years is a bit difficult for me to envision, and there are lots of things that we can do. But I think there was a really good quote in a NICU, National Infrastructure Commission for Wales article, which I think is a really good closing statement, that the cost of inaction is compromising Wales as we know it for future generations. So we do need to act now. And I think all of the ideas that the panelists and some of the audience members have contributed gives me that hope. So that's what I'll contribute to that.
Yeah, certainly. And I remember entering my career just after the Stern report really made that economic case completely clear, that inaction was going to cost us more, and it's costing us money now. I'm calling from Pontypridd today that was devastated by floods twice in the last few years. So those impacts are accelerating. Stephen.
Well, just a caveat, I'd echo Alina. I think 10 years isn't very long at all, really. You started, Tom, to about 2,000 years, and sometimes big change does take generations. But I think what I'd like to see, and we've touched upon it, is it'd be nice if every child in Wales could walk, wheel or cycle to school. And the reason I say that, for two reasons. If that were the case, it'd be brilliant for our kids. It would signal, a generational change where people were embedding walking, wheel and cycling into their daily lives. Obviously, it'd have immediate impacts of, the morning rush hour, less congestion, less emissions. But also it'd show that we'd done a lot of things right. So we'd have been designing our infrastructure so it was inclusive, so it was safe, a bit like you said about Japan, Tom, so that young people could walk, cycle on their own, not just mammals and us adults. Think about ourselves, but think about the most vulnerable people and making sure it's right for them.
Yeah. Okay. Well, seeing as I've got the chair, and I heard a wonderful provocation off somebody the other day that I'm gonna put here, because I think it's I think it might be worth it, and it links to your point as well, Stephen. And it links to a question around affordability of transport that was in the chat. So I'm going to suggest that in 10 years' time, we could be in a place where we have limited funds in Wales, and maybe the pensioners' bus pass is in the wrong direction. Maybe we should be providing free public transport to younger people as they start their career journeys and form habits of a lifetime, so that getting a car isn't like a race, as I'm seeing my 17-year-old needing to get a car to access the job market. Maybe we've got a transport system that gives them those opportunities, and we give them a few years grace to learn those habits, because transport is a skill, and to travel requires learned skills, and to be able to learn and understand our public transport network takes some time. So I think we should give young people the best possible start in terms of mobility by giving them access to free transport. And if we need to balance the books by removing that opportunity for an older generation, that's going to be my provocative suggestion for right now. Okay, well, I think it's time for me to wrap up. I don't know quite how I'm meant to end this, so I'm just going to end this with thanks to all of the speakers, Jarrad, Jim, Alina, Stephen. Thank you all very much for your time today. And thank you all for attending. I look forward to meeting you all in the not so distant future. Best of luck decarbonising our transport system. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, guys.
Cheers all.